Hey everyone, Pat Buchta here, Executive Director for Austin, Texas Musicians, and we are here today for a very special reason. We're right now, so many of our musicians in our community are facing a real crisis within really the next week. Okay, so on July 25th, those federal pandemic unemployment assistance benefits that every one of us has been getting, that so many of us have been getting, that's that $600 a week that many musicians and gig workers have been receiving. That's going to end on Saturday, okay, unless we can take action and get our senators to do something about that. So today we've created a very special show to try to really take some action, to talk about what's going on, and to generate some calls to those offices. We want to flood their inboxes, and we want to let them know how we feel about this. So we brought in some experts today to talk about some of the things that are going on with all this stuff. And right away, I want to bring in Sarah Lavin-Jones. Hi, Sarah. How are you today?
Hey, doing good. How are you?
Sarah is I'm great, Sarah. Now, Sarah is the legislative assistant to Congressman Lloyd Doggett. So Sarah's actually up there in D.C., where apparently it's not any cooler than it is down here in Texas right now.
No. With the humidity, we're breaking 100, so it's pretty warm.
That's crazy. Thank you, Sarah. I know we have a lot of important information to cover today. I'm also going to bring in Gwen Seale, who is an entertainment attorney with Mike Tollison Agency. And Gwen is also on the board of directors for Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts. Gwen, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gwen, Sarah, I know you guys have been working together a lot over the last weeks to really determine what some of this extension of benefits may look like. So we're going to talk a lot more about that in just a few minutes. But right now, I would like to bring in two very special people. These are Austin, Texas Musicians MAP members who have really stepped up and, kind of worked to create our own voting campaign over the next few months. We realize how important this stuff's going to be leading into November. And so one of our MAP members, Aubrey Hayes, really wanted to get this program off the ground. So without any further ado, I'll introduce ATX Music Votes Program Manager Aubrey Hayes.
Hiya.
And also, hey Aubrey. And also I'd like to bring in ATX Music Votes team member and MAP member, Scott Strickland.
What is up?
How are you, man?
Hey, doing good.
Thank you guys so much for being here today. So, really, I want to hand over the reins to the team. You guys have been doing the hard work, and I'm just going to kind of hang in the background and maybe manage the production a little bit while you guys take it away and talk about this very important stuff. So, Aubrey, would you please maybe take over and talk to us about why this is all so important right now?
Sure. Yeah, our purpose today here is to empower as many of you to call, write, or email your representatives and your senators, and to let them know that we need to act now unless they want to see a large portion of their constituent base without this funding that is so desperately needed. We have so many Austin, Texas musicians that have reached out to us over the past week and to let us know just how devastating this loss will be. I'm going to go ahead and read one of those stories. But just before we bring on our first caller of the day, this is from Layla Edwards. Hi, my name is Layla Edwards, and I am a mezzo-soprano in the Austin area. As we know, the current pandemic has had a major impact on our musical lives around the world, and I am no exception. As soon as the shutdown was announced in March, all of my performing income was immediately vanished, while I am fortunate enough to also maintain a private voice studio. Performing accounts for 50% of my annual income. I, along with 35 million others, have yet to receive the stimulus from the federal government. Thankfully, I was able to receive a grant from the Austin Music Disaster Relief Fund. I'm incredibly appreciative of the City of Austin Music and Entertainment Division for providing those resources. As a singer, this particular disease hits hard. It is a respiratory disease with potential long-term complications to your lungs and vocal tract if put on a ventilator. The growing consensus is it is transmitted via aerosols, which singers have the potential to produce at an even higher rate. We don't know when it will be safe for us to do what we love while other businesses return to normal. I know we possess great power when we all share our voices and force our elected officials to listen. If we want live performances to return, if we want our musicians to keep creating and providing entertainment during a time the world needs it most, then we need continued support. I am forever an optimist, and I know we'll come out of this on the other side with formidable pieces of work, but we can't do it alone. And before we bring on our first caller, let's just quickly go over some of the contact info that you'll need to make these calls and emails on your own. We all need to work together and stand and speak up. So this is just an example, but dear elected officials name here, my name is Aubrey Hayes, and I live in District 10. I am calling in support of extending the federal pandemic employment compensation. As you put together the next COVID-19 relief legislation in the Senate, I ask you to include language and funding consistent with achieving the objective of the FPUC bill that would extend federal unemployment benefits through January 31st, 2021. Today, as our nations face significant and economic social challenges resulting from the pandemic, thousands of musicians and gig workers will go out without the funds to survive for the indefinite future. And with 90% of venues in the Austin area at risk of closing by Halloween, artists will be put in a position that they may not be able to fully recover from. It will have a deep and long-lasting impact on our livelihoods and the local economy for years to come. I urge you to extend the federal pandemic unemployment compensation in order to provide an opportunity to recover from the pandemic for thousands of musicians and gig workers across Texas. Thank you for your consideration and continued public service. And we'll include some links and information to contact your senators in the chat. There are web forms that are available for you, as well as numbers and addresses to call said representatives. So we're here today to urge action to make sure we get those benefits extended. And we're going to bring on another MAP member, our good friend Zack Morgan, in just a second here. Okay, cool.
Hey.
Hey, Zack. How were you able to connect with these benefits?
When I heard that 1099 self-employed musicians or employees in general were going to be able to get this relief, in mid-March, I applied immediately. Like I think maybe the 15th of March or something. Mm-hmm. Didn't hear anything. Got rejected at first. I don't know if I was too early, maybe even. And didn't hear anything, was thinking, oh, they're just dealing with having to deal with 1099 workers. They're figuring it out. And a month went by, 2 months went by. I think late April, I reached out to Pat, who connected me with Gwen and another series of other people. I'm not even really sure who all I talked to. Somehow was able to get through to the right people and was put on unemployment with the FPUC, and it backdated to when I had originally applied, which was great. Luckily for me, I had saved up money, and I play a lot and have, been performing professionally full time for years now. So I had some money saved up, but had I not, I would have had no income for 2 months. I mean, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have that savings, and was kind of forced to be at the will of the unemployment office to get back to me whenever they could. And there's no way to get in contact with them directly. So it was kind of for me, I was lucky that I had that, and I was finally able to, before it was too late, get in contact with someone and get those funds going back. But I don't know if I would have been able to do that if I didn't have a connection to Gwen and these other people. And I know some folks just haven't been able still to get through right, because of how flooded they are with these requests and how many people need it. But yeah, so luckily I was able to get it done and have been on it since then.
I'm glad you were able to get through.
Yeah. And Zack, how is just from like a musician standpoint here, how has COVID-19 affected what it is that you're doing, and how have you changed and how have you adapted to that?
Well, unfortunately for me, I built my entire music career around live performance, which was a good move up until March. I've been very lucky and fortunate to connect with a lot of people in Austin. I'm a keyboardist, and there's not a ton of keyboardists in town. So over years and years, I've been able to pick up a lot of gigs, averaging around 175 to 200 shows a year, and making a pretty good salary, especially, I mean, for a musician. I left a tech job 5 years ago where I was making, close to six figures. And obviously I was nowhere close to that in the beginning of this, but as I further inch along, I'm making progress. I'm really happy with where I'm at. And then when the gigs started falling off the calendar, it was, oh, we're going to lose a couple. Oh, it's going to be a few weeks. Oh, it's going to be a month. And now here we are 4 months later. I think I've missed 60 gigs, like close to $20,000 worth. And yeah, like I make a lot of stuff from weddings and corporate events, and all of that stuff is being just thrown to next year, or corporate stuff is just being outright canceled. So it's still kind of only the beginning of really knowing the impact. But the impact has been huge so far. And for now, there's really not a whole lot that can be done, for live, especially for live musicians. There's really no opportunities that are really safe. I've done a couple weddings here and there, and there may be a few more, but it's not something that's going to scale up to a livable wage anytime soon. And surely no music venues or those types of gigs that were kind of my supplemental income will be happening anytime soon. So I've kind of pivoted to doing live stream stuff and home recording and trying to do lessons, but it's just my whole career was built around playing live music. And that was the first thing to be erased from this pandemic era. And probably the last or one of the last things to come back, because it is considered non-essential and recreational. And it's all built around people gathering closely together and everything that we're not supposed to be doing right now. And I understand that from a health perspective, and I'm not trying to rush into it, but it is very concerning considering that was 90% of my income from music was live, and maybe a few as lessons or session work and stuff like that, just because that was my preference. I love playing live music, so that's what I built it around. So now it's just kind of trying to pivot and figure out what I can do from here, which I'm lucky to have a space to create and technology to be able to do some remote work and maybe buy groceries with it or stuff like that. But it's not career money right now, and I don't think it's something that it really is attainable for me, because everyone like me is trying to find remote work right now, and there's not much of it. There never has been, but there's even less now because everybody's looking for it.
Right. Yeah. And you've been streaming, quite a bit too.
I'm sorry, Scott. I think Sarah, did you have a question as well for Zach?
Yeah, Zach, thanks for sharing your experience. I think that's really important. I did want to respond to one thing. You said, you got that message from TWC that you'd been rejected. I just wanted to clarify that, because there's been a lot of confusion around that, and rightly so, because it's like, well, did I do the application wrong? Like, why was I rejected? So when you applied, it could have been that you were rejected because 1099 workers weren't eligible for unemployment at the time. But now, even if you are applying for the first time and you're a 1099 worker, that benefit still applies to you. You can still apply for it, whether or not you get the additional $600 bump or not. But the reason why TWC is sending those rejection notices, and they're going to continue to send rejection notices to any 1099 worker, is because the way that the federal legislation was written, TWC has to try and identify whether you have W-2 earnings or not. And that rejection letter is basically telling you what you already know.
Yeah,
you don't have W-2 earnings, so you can't get the state benefit. But what's confusing is it should be followed up with, but you may be eligible for this additional 1099 benefit.
Right.
So to clear up that confusion, that's still going to continue. So if folks are applying for the first time and they're getting those rejection letters, just know that it doesn't necessarily mean you're like flat out rejected from ever getting unemployment benefits.
Cool. Yeah. And I think they did a good job down the line, weeks later, of messaging that on the website, at least saying like, you will receive a rejection. You don't need to do anything. But I think I was just so early on that I was trying to get ahead of everything. You can't get in contact with anyone, and there wasn't enough information going around yet. And you know, now we have each other and we're sharing resources on this stuff. So over time, it's become a little more manageable for people that are trying to get onto it. But early on, it was so confusing and you couldn't find the right information. And understandably so. I mean, TWC all of a sudden got flooded with this stuff that they've never had to deal with before. So like, no judgment to that. Like I can't even imagine the amount of work that they're doing, but it was a frustrating experience, I'm sure, on all ends for everyone, just because of the circumstances, you know?
Yeah. And I would just add, you know, if anyone ever has questions, you know, how to navigate unemployment or any federal or state related questions, please consider our office as a resource. You can send an email to the congressman at lloyd.doggett@mail.house.gov. Look at that. And you can, if you're in Austin, you can also call our Austin office. That number is 512-916-5921. But we really are here to help. And one of the things that I can offer to assist with is I can pass along anyone's name and information with their permission to the Texas Workforce Commission, and just say something as simple as, they haven't been able to get anybody through on the phone. They just need a callback number. And TWC has been great about proactively calling back folks when we raise their information within a week. So if you're just hitting roadblock after roadblock, like, you're not doing anything wrong. So feel free to use our office as a resource, because that's what we're here for.
That's great.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I know that I've used Representative Lloyd Doggett's office for a number of things, not just this unemployment related stuff, but I always am surprised and grateful to hear the voices on the other line. They seem to always be listening and to always be really caring. And if they're not the people that you need to be reaching out to, they get you in touch with the right people. So I really do appreciate that. So I think now we're gonna go ahead and move on to talking with Sarah and Gwen about some of the things at play on the federal level and how it affects Austin musicians. Zack, thank you so much for joining us and for being on and airing your grievances and your successes. And
anytime.
I think also I wanted to comment that, you're a perfect example of when people think musician, they think like lazy, like gigging, like not a career-minded person, and you are a perfect example of the antithesis to that. So thank you very much for speaking to your experience.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's important to stress for sure, is we're not all starving artists. We have built careers out of this, and I'm very mindful of my budgeting, my careers, and yeah, so I think the government kind of the initiatives that we've seen recently illustrate that maybe they're sort of out of touch with that, and they think we are starving artists, or that $207 a week might float us for our needs. And like, I've built a lifestyle around my income, and now I need to figure out how to sustain that lifestyle, basically.
Absolutely.
But thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Take care, Zach.
Okay, cool. Sarah, over the past week, we've been urging our musicians to take action and our senators to adopt this HEROES Act with Congress back in session today. What did the HEROES Act seek to do, and what can we expect to happen with that HEROES Act now?
Yeah. So you're probably wondering, like, why am I calling my senators but not my House members? Or should I be calling my state members but not my federal members? So the reason why they are having you target your efforts at senators is because on May 15th, the House passed the HEROES Act, and it was a sweeping stimulus bill to address a number of issues that we know that folks are facing as a result of the pandemic. But one of those was unemployment. And so what the HEROES Act did is it extended the $600 federal unemployment compensation supplement until January 2021. So the thought was, let's get folks all the way through to the end of this year and over the hike of the next month. It's been 2 months and the Senate has not taken up that bill. McConnell is not interested in taking an honest look at it. And so what's happened is now we are days away from the deadline in Texas, even though the $600 weekly benefit in the CARES Act was through July 31st. The way that TWC calculates their weekly benefit, the 25th is going to be the last week that they're going to pay that out. And we're down to crunch time, and we're leaving decisions that are impacting. When I say we, I mean Senate Republicans are leaving decisions at the last minute to folks who they don't have a few extra days for the Senate to figure it out. So what's being considered now is, I think that there is some consensus, some bipartisan consensus that this additional funding needs to be extended. I think Texas is an extreme example because the minimum benefit that was just discussed is so low compared to a lot of other states. And so I think that makes a really strong case for why getting rid of this supplemental federal benefit is going to have a huge impact in Texas, because in another state, that might have a more progressive state government, they might have more generous benefits, but that's just not the case in Texas. So what's being debated right now, this is not insider info, this is just what I'm reading in the news, is, Republicans are pushing back against the $600. They feel strongly that the $600 is not the right amount. And they're perpetuating this idea that the $600 is so much money that people don't want to go back to work, right? There's an incentive to stay unemployed, which, is just, it's offensive. It's the same trope of the fact that working people, just want to take advantage of the government, and that's absolutely not the case. So what's being debated is a federal benefit that is somewhere between $200 and $400 additional a week, as opposed to the $600. So I would just really encourage folks, when explaining how losing this is going to impact you, what would that look like if you did get the extension, but you only got $200 more a month, or you only got $300 more a month? How would that impact your choices in terms of spending? Would you have money to give and contribute to the economy? Would that even be enough money to get by? Because I think that's kind of where the status of conversations are right now. But Senate Republicans want to introduce their own bill, and that has not been introduced as far as I know. And then from there, they'll go to figure out some sort of negotiation.
I think it greatly depends on where you're living in the United States as well, whether you're living in a city, whether you're living in the country. There's so much at play here and so many variables that aren't being taken into consideration. Yeah. And maybe that, I know I'm a supporter of AOC, and she has been lobbying for a long time, not lobbying, but arguing for a long time for us to acknowledge the state of poverty in the country. And I don't think it's even being recognized at the moment. Sorry, Scott, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Aubrey, you're totally right. So Sarah, what is one of the, what is the most effective way? What is a silver bullet for getting attention, to Congress for these our representatives to do something about this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't know if there's necessarily a silver bullet, because every member of Congress is their own person. They have their own win.
Sure.
And so I think, but there is definitely power in numbers. I think if 200 people call a member of Congress, or they write a member of Congress in the same day, and there's an influx of people with the same messaging, talking about the same thing, I think that can have an impact, because it's sort of an influx of folks, right? I tell everyone, call your members of Congress. They work for you, and you should be bothering them all the time. We don't feel like it's a bother. We love to hear from folks, and we feel that that's our job. But I think the targeted approach that you guys are doing, which is large quantities of incoming, and it doesn't really matter, whatever your preference is. I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable calling. Just think about it this way. Whoever you're calling, it's probably going to be somebody like me. We're answering the phones, should be friendly, should listen to what you're saying. But if you don't feel comfortable and you want to send an email, I don't think that there's one that's more effective than the other. But I do think a coordinated campaign like you guys are working on is effective.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And we'll post
Yeah.
the information, in comments and all that stuff below after the stream's over with.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm going to kind of pivot over to Gwen. We understand that many of our musicians have had a hard time connecting to unemployment resources. We kind of addressed this earlier, but I think, Sarah touched on this. Why is that, and what can they do about getting it to go forward? I know that personally, I've reached out to Texas Music Office in addition to other people. I've seen some really great people posting different numbers and emails. Is there anything you can add to this point?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, Sarah kind of answered the main issues relating to TWC, and that their systems were not able to take on the millions of filings from 1099 workers. And so now going forward, if you're a musician or a gig worker and maybe you're having trouble connecting to your benefits, getting a hold of anyone at TWC, maybe you receive a notice from TWC and you just don't really understand what it means, Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts is here for you. And all you have to do is go to talarts.org, TALARTS.org, and fill out a form with your contact information, and you'll get connected to one of our attorneys who will take on your issues, and we will get you hooked into TWC's system. So I ended up befriending the general counsel over at Texas Workforce Commission, Melissa Chapa. She's been on the night shift show for I think 2 or 3 times, and she is so helpful. And so what I do is anytime a musician comes to Tala then refers the musician to me. I talk to Melissa, and usually within about 24 hours, Melissa will have either responded to the questions that the musician has, or if the musician needs to get into, maybe they're having a problem when they're requesting their payments, she'll hook you in with the right person over there at TWC who can get your payment request processed. So just know that Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts is also here to help musicians, artists, anyone who is having issues wading through the nightmare that is Texas Workforce Commission.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you, Gwen. And just putting a wider lens on it, what are some of the other services? Because me personally, I've never heard of Tala before. So what are some of the other things that you all do as an organization that could be beneficial to local musicians or touring musicians or something like that?
Yeah, so Tala's actually been around since 1979. We're run by lawyers and accountants and not marketing gurus, so that's probably, we're not the best at doing, marketing. But traditionally, so let's say before COVID, we were helping musicians, artists dealing with maybe they needed a contract drafted, or they received a contract and they needed it reviewed, or maybe they had questions like business questions, or copyright and trademark related questions, or maybe you're a nonprofit organization and you're wanting to incorporate, we would help with all of those matters. And then COVID hit and we realized that, wow, our artist base is really needing help wading through the TWC nightmare and understanding the various CARES Act loan programs. And so the attorneys and accountants with Tala ended up shifting our main focus towards helping these folks kind of navigating through these systems. And so anyone who has questions can just go to talarts.org, and there's no fees involved. It's all pro bono, and we will help you with your unemployment benefits and CARES Act loans related matters and questions.
Very cool. Very cool. And also, you dropped Melissa Chapa's name. I will tell you that you are absolutely 100% right about her. She is the main reason why I have unemployment benefits. She is the
MVP of TWC. Yeah. Like, she's the best.
Yeah. She literally set me up herself and pushed it through, because I was just like Zach. I was having so many problems trying to get unemployment to go through. So yeah, she got in. Yeah.
Yes, I love her so much.
Yeah.
There's some really great information being shared right now, and before Sarah has to get going, I want to invite both Sarah and Gwen to chat a little bit about what's at play. And you guys have been working together for the last 2 weeks to answer some of these tough questions that we all need to know the answers to. Can we take a moment for Gwen to ask those questions to Sarah and get some more information about how this all works?
Yeah. So Sarah, first question I have. So the Senate has been on recess for the last several weeks. And just curious, during a recess, do senators actually still work on legislation, or is it like a vacation?
Well, I would respond the same way I did the question about, what works to advocate and activate your member of Congress. I think every member of Congress is different. I have heard rumors that Trump and I believe Lindsey Graham are golfing right now, but that is not necessarily the case for every single member of Congress on recess. Recess is more just a reflection generally of our members in Washington, D.C. voting on legislation, or our members working in district offices. So we actually refer to it as a district work period in the House, because it should be a time where members are, if safe to do so, in their district offices and working on things. But from a staff perspective, whether or not the member is in DC and is voting, we're always working on legislation. It's just a matter of whether there's going to be votes scheduled in DC. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. And to piggyback off that, how long does the Senate have to kind of craft this new bill and get House support before the next, I guess there's probably another recess coming up soon, right? So how much time do they have to kind of, I guess, get their shit together?
So I think the thing that's tough and frustrating is that, the Senate calendar looks one way, but that calendar doesn't necessarily reflect the lives of people who are counting on their members of Congress to make decisions. So, as I mentioned before, the $600 benefit, that assistance that folks are counting on is going to end the 25th. So to me, that should be the deadline, right? That should be what's driving the Senate calendar. But I don't get to make the Senate calendar. So as it stands right now, McConnell extended the session days in DC where members are voting through to the first week of August. That's a change because generally August is the longest period of time when members of Congress are in their district work period. And so, if it's being extended so that we can get some real genuine reforms, that's one thing. But to kind of, as I said before, we've been ready to go. House Democrats have been ready to go since May 15th. So, you kicking the can down the road another week is already long past due, to be honest. And a lot of the provisions in the HEROES Act are expiring in the end of July. So just because the Senate wants to take another week to get their act together doesn't reflect the reality of most, working families.
Yeah. Have you heard whether or not there will be another stimulus bill or another stimulus payment issued for Americans during this next round of legislation?
Yeah, so the stimulus payments, some people also call it economic impact payments. That's another thing that is up for discussion. So again, everything I'm hearing is just what I'm seeing in the news. Definitely those high-level conversations are above my pay grade. But yes, I think there are conversations, and it is a consideration. What's being considered is whether or not to adjust the income threshold for folks who are eligible to get that payment. If you are a single filer, when you file your taxes, $75,000 was the cutoff for the full benefit, and then it was phased out after that. So part of the conversation is, should the economic stimulus impact payments be tailored to folks within a certain income threshold? What that income threshold is has not been decided on. But in the HEROES Act, the economic impact payments, a second round was approved by the House. So again, same story, waiting on to figure it out.
Now, I've heard some Republicans proffer an idea about giving people, quote, back to work bonuses, meaning that if you go back to work, you will get like a bonus payment. And some Republicans are saying they support that instead of extending the FPUC $600 a week. And so, practically speaking, something like that just doesn't really make sense to me because, for musicians or service industry folks or gig workers, first of all, it's like these jobs aren't really available. And even if there are jobs available, there's seriously some safety concerns, considering the fact, like, you know, here in Texas, we live in a state where people are like fighting over whether or not they should wear a mask. So have you heard about these back to work bonuses? And are you hearing that, you know, Republicans are maybe wanting to go forward with that idea as opposed to extending FPUC?
Yeah, there's definitely been rumors about that as well. I think that the challenge with any of this is the reason why the $600 number was ultimately decided upon and why the decision was made that everyone across the board, you know, is, if you're getting unemployment, is going to get that $600 supplement, is because that was the easiest thing for the Workforce Commission to administer. So think about all the challenges that TWC had with the influx of people calling. They had to stand up a whole new program because they never before had to use 1099 earnings to give anyone a benefit. So that's why, you know, ultimately the decision was made that the $600 number across the board was easiest for the Workforce Commission. So, you know, I think Republicans and the White House are throwing out a lot of different ideas to get people back to work. But I just don't see how that's going to be realistic to implement for workforce commissions, and to create a benefit, a supplemental benefit that's like tailored to your income would require, you know, TWC to implement a whole nother system all over again. And so, you know, I think that that's really the big challenge here is like, we can talk about, you know, all the baloney of people don't want to work and let's force them to get back to work. But when the rubber hits the road and you actually have to implement something like that, it's going to be really, really challenging. And, you know, the benefits will have expired. So again, people are in need, they're waiting for support, and then they're just going to be waiting again for this new complicated policy to get rolled out.
So let's shift over to communication strategies. So like today, we're engaging in a call-in, and musicians are going to be writing to Senators Cruz and Cornyn. And I just wanted to know, what are some other effective communication strategies? Like, would tweeting at Senators Cruz and Cornyn be effective? Would commenting on their Facebook posts be effective? Like, let's say we got a bunch of musicians to all of a sudden start commenting on a couple of Ted Cruz's or John Cornyn's tweets. You know, I imagine that they run their own Twitter account, so they'd be able to see all of those responses, and more people would, and more people might start engaging in doing that. Have you seen people trying to do things like that? And do you think that would be, you know, potentially effective? I
mean, you know, it's dealer's choice, however you want to engage. And I know a lot of people, social media is something that they're drawn to doing. So I wouldn't necessarily discourage or encourage that. I think what is most effective, though, is being able to share that you are a voting member in Texas. You have the power to vote for that person. And so what gets lost a little bit on a social media platform is like, if you're just trolling someone on Twitter, they don't necessarily know that you actually live in Texas, you're a voter in Texas, and you know, have the power to vote them in and out of office. So that's why I feel like sometimes going through that formal process of engaging with the office, either via email or on the phone, where you can make it clear, this is my address, I live in Texas, I am a voter. You know, I think that that's more effective because they know where it's coming from. And it's not something that can just be disregarded as like, oh, this person's just attacking me because, you know, and they have no connection to me, and I'm not beholden to anything that they're asking me to do.
That definitely makes sense. Final question. So the Senate staff in DC, which fields phone calls and reviews voicemails, are they really passing along the information in those phone calls and voicemails to the senators, even if the positions that are proffered in these calls and voicemails are fairly contrary to what the senators' platforms?
I mean, honestly, I can't say. Yeah. I feel like it is the expectation that if you are a constituent and you're calling in, your voice be passed along to the member of Congress. In our office, when we say we're going to pass the message along to the congressman, we do pass the message along to the congressman. But, you know, I can't speak for any of the policies in those offices. But to your point about presenting contrary beliefs, I think a lot of times folks they want to reach out to a member who they know agrees with them. And we let those people come be a sounding board. We will totally agree with you. But I think it is important when you do have a contrary belief that makes it 10 times more important to call, and to call often, to email, and to email often. Because again, if you are the one person crusade calling their office every day, like, do you never change? But if you have 200 people calling, it makes it a more difficult staff level decision about whether or not to then ultimately tell the senator. But I don't know how they handle calls in their office. I can only speak to how they're handled in our office, but I would hope that they pass the message along.
Just kind of as a personal side, I was super stoked last week when I called Cornyn's office and I actually talked to a real human being. I've tried to call, Cruz's office and Cornyn's office for a couple of years now, just for some various music legislation, questions and some of my concerns. And all the time I would get voicemail. And I actually talked to a person for about 10 minutes and it was quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think having healthy dialogue across the aisle is super important. And I think that our communities a lot of times are politically siloed. And so I think it's great to engage in the conversation. So I would definitely recommend it. And I'm glad that you were able to make that connection.
Thank you guys so much for sharing all that information. It was really
Thank you all.
helpful. And on that point, Sarah, before you go, I really appreciate that comment on the siloed bit, because I feel like right now everybody is operating on a lot of fear and a lot of anger, because a lot of the things in this country that have been unfunctional for a while are being revealed in a pretty serious way. And I think that I myself have been trying to not engage too much in the cancel culture, and I try to engage with people that I disagree with. I try to make a point to talk with them and see if there's any point in which we can agree, and then go off of that. And I think that if we're going to kind of get out of this mentality of siloing Republicans versus Democrats, it's we should all be on the same page to better the lives of everyone involved. And the only way we're going to do that is by engaging with those people and not canceling them. So thank you so much.
And by voting, of course.
And by voting, of course.
is really important. The last thing I'll add, and then I promise I will stop filling up all the time, is I appreciate that you bring up kind of the current context in which we're thinking about all this stuff, and acknowledging that unemployment isn't the only issue that on a lot of people's minds. I think another thing that should not get lost in terms of the conversation on extending the unemployment benefit is the fact that of the 30 million folks who are getting the extended benefit right now, a good portion of them are people of color, and they're women. So this is an equity issue when we're talking about extending the benefit, and it's something that everybody will benefit from. But we need to speak honestly, and we need to speak directly about the equity lens and the context that these unemployment extensions we find ourselves in. So there was a Congressional Budget Office report that came out in July that found 47% of workers receiving the unemployment insurance in July who are facing this cutoff are people of color. 53% of the workers being subject to the cutoff are women. So again, half of the folks we're talking about, women and people of color. And I think that that's an important part of the conversation, that it needs to be elevated as well.
Absolutely. I completely 100% agree.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Gwen.
I think now we're going to go ahead and share another story that we've been shared with from a duo that depend on this benefit to get by. They've wanted to remain anonymous, so I'm going to go ahead and share that story with y'all. We've been collecting TWC on the weeks we don't generate revenue by playing online shows or otherwise make disqualifying income. It's been extremely helpful, especially because self-employment taxes hit us harder than expected. If it weren't for the funds, we'd have emptied all our business savings, reinvestment capital we usually build between releases for manufacturing and promo, sold off gear, played where open and put ourselves at risk, or a combination of those to pay mortgage, utilities, insurance, and food expenses. I started playing music full-time in 2004, mostly by living super cheap, 5 roommates and daily ramen and Jack in the Box tacos in a small college town, but living expenses in Austin and anything healthy is tricky without finding some solid income, maybe a garden and or a full house of roommates. It's a challenge. It's a challenge anywhere with the reinvention and learning and relearning revenue streams that always change or shrink. Live shows, national and regional tours, and private gigs have always been the constant keystone source. The sinkhole left from those being paused is eating everything. The FPUC is like a retaining wall, keeping everything we've built from, oh goodness, something happened here. Keeping everything we built from sliding outside. Definitely trying to be positive and hopeful that we can figure something out to hold us over. At this point, we're going to bring on Madden.
Hey, y'all, how's it going?
Yeah. Hi, Dave. Thanks for joining us.
Howdy, happy to be here.
So I believe, let's see, are you here to share a story as well with us for the FPUC?
I'm happy to do that. I just got in late. I'm sorry about being so late. I thought I was going to be
all
on
good.
a little bit later, so I was just going to listen for a little bit, if that's okay. I don't know if you have anything else so I could just catch stride with the rest of y'all.
No, that's okay. It's all good. Aubrey, thank you for sharing that story. We've got someone else is going to be coming in a little bit, Mr. John Pointer. But I do want to say thank you to everyone that's been on. Gwen, thank you so much. You're a hammer. You're tough as nails. I appreciate that. And to Sarah as well, and to Zach earlier. I do, the Austin, Texas musicians, we did get in a statement from someone a few days ago, and they wanted us to share their story, but they wanted to remain anonymous. So I'm going to share that story now, and we can pick up from there. So here it goes. I wanted to share my personal story with you regarding how my life will look at the end of the month when the FPUC are currently slated to end. I'm a full-time musician, sound engineer, and talent booker. My monthly income was somewhere between $3,500 and $4,000 before the pandemic. As we are all now aware, the nature of large groups close together, especially in enclosed spaces, goes against every guideline we have been given in order to stop and eliminate the spread of COVID-19. These very types of gatherings are precisely how people gather to enjoy and interact with live music. This fact completely eliminates my sole source of income and the income of many others in our field. Past that, zero guidance has been given as to when venues will reopen. So even if we did want to go back to work, there is nowhere to play. This goes for private events too. Companies across the United States and the world have completely eliminated corporate events, and weddings and parties have been canceled until it is safe to hold such events. Given these truths, the extra $600 a week that the FPUC provides is an absolute lifeline to members of our community. Not only is it keeping our landlords and mortgages paid, it is allowing us to remain away from our stages until it is safe to share our talents with what was up and with what was given in March in a thriving, profitable entertainment industry. If I lose this extra assistance, I will default on my mortgage within 2 to 3 months and be forced to make very difficult decisions. The state assistance of $207 a week for 1099 workers is absolutely not enough to live on. And this should be obvious to anyone who is actually paying attention. I am not the only one. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of individuals employed in this sector will suffer extreme hardship, exposure, and infection to the coronavirus, and eventual homelessness. Our representatives elected to serve the best interests need to take action on this very grave issue. They will be remembered for how they responded to this, and their record will follow them. If the governor's mansion remains closed for tours, if we have a statewide mask order, if we continue to show tens of thousands of Americans are testing positive for coronavirus in an upward trend, it is not safe to return to our stages and our studios. Aubrey.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that story, Scott. So Dave, you're also a musician working here in Texas. You're a brilliant composer and arranger and a MAT member, just like Scott and myself. It seems like you've been pretty busy during the pandemic. What are some of the things you've been doing to stay busy during quarantine?
Right. So I'll just say, the music industry as a whole is used to rolling with the punches. After all, we were the gig economy before the gig economy was cool. I've learned over the many crises that the music industry has faced over the years, has weathered over the years, especially the Great Recession of 2007, 2008, comes to mind, that our industry is an inherently risky one. We don't make the same amount of money in any kind of a normal good year throughout the year. January is not the same as June. It's not like having a 9-to-5 job. And because of that, we need to be prepared as a species, as an artistic species, to be prepared for when things go wrong. Nobody could have been prepared for things going this wrong. Nobody. We just, doesn't matter if you had some savings in the bank. It doesn't matter if you had several different income streams. And I pride myself on those things. Being a professional musician, I make sure that I have savings in the bank to help provide for the lean times, which come every year, by the way. They're called January and February, after everybody stops partying and joins a gym, starts doing yoga and drinking smoothies and stops going out to bars. That's just, 2 months basically of almost no income for most musicians. But again, really nobody could have prepared for this. So, like many other musicians, what I did was hustle. I just relied on I've never thought about this rhyme before, but my hustle muscles. As a songwriter, I don't know how I've never thought of that rhyme, but I relied on those, and I kind of got to work right away. I started a weekly Sunday morning live stream, kind of a church thing that was like a sing-along with Southern gospel stuff, trying to bring some positivity into the world and to try to provide some kind of a beneficial service to all the people who were newly quarantined at home. I've also kind of upped my video editing skills. Video is such a necessary evil, even though they killed the radio star. We have to have an alliance with them. I think of video as kind of the empire in Star Wars, and musicians are like the rebels with all the shitty. Are we allowed to cuss on this?
I already have. So I feel like you.
I don't mind.
True.
Dave, yes.
Yes, Pat just jumps in on the side. Yeah, with all of our shitty gear stained with old beer from clubs or whatever, and video just cares about that you're not wearing a plaid shirt because it doesn't look good or whatever on their white balance or whatever they have to do. But reluctantly, I kind of upped all my skills there and started producing videos, because video is the way that we're getting content. Even with those skill sets, even with savings in the bank, even with diversified income portfolio, nobody really could have protected against a crisis of this magnitude and scope. And then when you couple that with the lack of any kind of clear direction about how we're going to get out of this thing that other countries have enjoyed, it's going to drag on so long that really nobody could be prepared for having almost no income at all for a year. So we definitely need to be talking about this, talking about the FPUC and hopefully its extension.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, Dave, how have you been? How have you been holding up, man? I mean, just from your perspective. I mean, I know that you talked a lot about the ins and outs and doing live streams and stuff, but I mean, like going from pre-corona to post-corona. I mean, like, how's your mindset changed around what we need to do as musicians? Just curious.
Man, I appreciate the question, Scott. And it's been really weird. It's been this like little mini social laboratory in my own mind. I feel like I just turned 38 and I've been doing this for my whole life. I mean, I've been a professional musician since I was 14 and doing it essentially full time. from that long. So for that long, I've been packing up my car, humping hundreds of pounds of gear to God knows where, setting it all up, being a construction worker, you know, and then turning into an artist, and then being a construction worker at the end of the night, all tired and having to drive a long way. I mean, I've been doing that for a really long time. I was already burned out on it a little bit before this, so I can't actually help but wonder if this kind of break in the system is maybe gonna this jarring break is going to help us to realize that we can be doing a couple things smarter, just like a lot of industries are thinking about. Maybe some percentage of our people can work from home. Maybe some music stuff can happen remotely, or more of it, and maybe we can work a little bit smarter and not harder. I just went out and played my first gig on Friday, and I felt pretty good about it. It was outdoors on this very spacious patio. It was just me. I didn't have any other people with it. It was like kind of a slog of a gig, 4 hours, just a lot of playing, a lot of singing, and I felt okay with it. But I went into it wondering, is this going to feel like this big cathartic release to finally be playing music live for a bunch of, I call them civilians. But weirdly, it kind of didn't, and I don't even feel that negative about that. But that's just me personally. I hear from a lot of my peers and colleagues how much they're just desperate to get back on that stage and play for everybody. And I don't know. I'm still gonna. That's always gonna be a part of my life. But I think 10 years ago it was 80% of my life, and pre-pandemic it was like a third. And maybe I'm ready for it to be more like a quarter. Because a lot of the work, it's not challenging for me anymore, I guess. And I'm interested in doing big, wild projects that I don't know how to do. So it forces me to learn how to do something, but it's just me.
Sure thing. Gotcha.
I think you have a great point. It's forcing us, a lot of us, to learn how to do things on our own. I mean, I was just creating some single artwork yesterday and learning Photoshop and learning how to do all of it myself because I'm trying to cut costs where I can and still come up with something that looks professional and something I'm proud of. So I think, and also I think there are a lot of people offering free trainings, free webinars to try and help musicians. And I think those are great things to look out for. If you've got the time, do some research and look at different webinars that are out right now. There's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot to learn, I think, as well.
Absolutely. And, when we become an amateur Photoshop editor or an amateur videographer, nobody dies. There's a lot of people trying to be an amateur virologist. Don't do that, people. Don't become that. And don't spend your time spreading views about what you happen to think about virology after you've read a blog post or whatever. But unfortunately for the photographers, who were perhaps the hardest hit earliest on when the internet bore its way through the world and destroyed everything, they were the first or the second to go. Maybe we were the first with Napster or something. But yeah, I tell younger musicians that I mentor, one of the biggest things is diversify your skill sets. You don't have to be an expert at everything, but know how to do a little bit of everything. Because if you're a bass player and the gig comes down to, one bass player or a bass player that knows how to run a little bit of live sound, then the gig is going to go to that guy. I mean, even if you don't have to be a professional live sound engineer, but it just comes down to being as well-rounded as possible. And we're being forced to do that more now than ever. So it's good, Aubrey. That's excellent that you're, taking the time to do that.
Absolutely.
And guys, I think I know Scott's got one more question for Dave, but then I definitely want to. We've been stacking up a lot of viewer questions, so I want to maybe pivot in a second and ask those to Gwen and see if she can maybe answer some of these. But Scott, you first. Did you
me first?
Well, I think we have one more question for Dave.
Okay.
About
yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So here we go. This is just in. Dave. Okay. I know many of us are dependent on the combination of the federal pandemic unemployment compensation and Texas unemployment benefits. How has your income been affected by the pandemic, and why do you need the benefits to continue?
What's the second part there? Why what?
And why do you need the benefits to continue? Like, what's basically the importance of those benefits actually continuing?
On a personal level, like I personally would probably be fine, but I would like to fight for their continuation because I just know how so many other people won't be okay if they don't continue. The pandemic has been a hard hit to all of us, but I do still have a couple things. And as far as I have received some of the state and the federal unemployment benefits. But it's been real scattershot the weeks that I'm able to or not able to receive them based on other work that I'm doing. If I'm making, too much income, so it comes and goes. The truth is that if I never received any, it's fine. It's fine. But I am happy to take it because it helps. Well, it's not like the city of Austin, right? And I don't even want to get into that because I'm tired of hearing myself talk, and I'm sure you all are too. But they got this thing where it's like you had to prove to them that you don't have 2 months worth of your expenses in your bank account, as if that makes you wealthy enough to not need $1,000. I mean, just because someone is not living hand to mouth and is going to get kicked out onto the street doesn't mean that they can't also put good use to these the federal funds and the state funds and do good things with them. I mean, to tell you the truth, I would say that the vast majority of that money that I've received, I've already cycled back out into the community by hiring other musicians to play on my videos and stuff. So it's a good thing for it to continue, a good thing for it to continue for everybody, but a very necessary thing for it to continue for a lot of people who desperately need it. And now I'm tired of myself talking, so we can go.
Hey, Pat, do you mind if I ask a question to the musicians in this group? So I think that for those people who are not involved within the music industry, that they really don't understand that there's like zero money in streaming. So, a song is streamed on Spotify, there's, fractions of pennies that are generated from that. And I don't think that people really understand that, physical product sales are down. And so musicians really only make money from touring. And so I guess my question for this group is, approximately how much money are y'all making from, streaming on Spotify or Apple each year? I mean, I imagine that it's probably, not very much, right?
I have a graphic here that I saved last night. So this is according to each streaming service and an average. Streaming service royalties for Spotify per stream, you make 0.00437 cents, and streams needed for $1 of income is 229. Apple Music, it's around the same. You need about 249 streams to make $1. Apple Music. Sorry, no, that was Amazon Music. My bad. Apple Music is about around 127 streams. And then YouTube, you need 1,450 streams to make $1.
Well, and even with YouTube, if you don't have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time within a 12-month period, you can't even have, ads run on your content, so you can't even make ad revenue. And so I think that it's important for people to really understand, like, hey, look, like, the only money that's really out there for musicians is touring money. And since all that's gone, all we have is our Spotify money or Apple money, which is like nothing. And I think the more that people can get out and say stuff like that, the more people might maybe understand more about, the plight that musicians face that is, pretty unique.
Yeah. And also, Gwen, I heard that basically a lot of things are being funneled through Netflix, obviously, but instead of signing a deal with your publisher where you're getting paid those royalties or what have you, those sync rights, basically, Netflix is offering musicians like a flat deal now, or they're going to start offering like a flat deal. I could be wrong about that, but
so like a buyout.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
So they'll buy you out instead of paying you as it goes or whatever. They'll just buy you out at a flat rate. So now even the sync rights, which is basically probably second to touring, that's how becoming a hindrance. For me personally, I'm kind of like treating all of these streams as like a high interest, like maybe like a semi high yield savings account. like maybe when I'm 70, I'll have enough, money stashed away to kind of like, live off of for the rest of my life or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's not, I mean, it's very low. It's extremely low.
The band Wolfpack, the amazing kind of new age funk band Wolfpack, gave an interview, maybe some of you have seen on like CNN Money, where he's interviewed. It's you got to check it out. But the lead singer of that band was talking about streaming royalties and saying that it's not really helpful to talk in terms of dollars or cents or the penny. So he's like, really, to talk about it, you need to divide the penny into a 1/100th of a penny, which he calls a pity. So he talks about everything and how many pities that a musician earns per stream, and that's really the only way to talk about it, which is just perfect. Yeah, it's negligible. I don't pay attention to it at all. All my music, well, some of my music is up on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, YouTube, whatever. And yeah, sure, every now and then I get some email with just a hilarious amount of pities that I'm being paid. So I try not to pay attention to it at all. Yeah, it comes down to, you say touring or just live performance in general. That can
that's right.
Touring down the street, touring locally. Yeah, I agree.
Thanks, guys. I think before Gwen needs to hop, we're going to ask her just a couple of questions from our viewers, and then we actually have another guest back in the green room right now who's going to join us in just a moment and talk about some of the federal pandemic unemployment compensation. So, Gwen, real quick, we have a question from our friend Amir Nubach. Amir, we love you. You're so gracious on the page, and I know you really enjoyed, I guess, some of the benefits of being an Austin, Texas musicians member and pro member. And Amir has a question. What would you recommend as a course of action for someone who applied for unemployment in late June and has not received benefits yet?
So, Amir, I think my first question for you is whether or not you've been every 2 weeks requesting your payments through your TWC portal. And if you have, and you still haven't received your benefits yet, what I'll do is I'll shoot you a message on Facebook and we can get connected, and then I'll connect you over with Untitled Chapter over at TWC, and she'll figure out whatever's going on with your particular circumstances. Valissa is like the MVP and has helped so many countless musicians, and I love her, and we'll get this straightened away. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Gwen. We keep joking that when this is all over, we keep adding pictures of margaritas onto what we owe Valissa for all the help she's given us.
Yeah, I told her last week, I was like, okay, Valissa, we're on number 6. Like, I owe you 6 pictures now. So it might be coming upon 7.
We've got another question from Sarah Milligan. Sarah asks, what do you do if you worked part-time wages and part-time self-employed? As you may get more students at random 1099 gigs, how do you report that when you request benefits? It's only a small amount of money that is barely livable. Does this mean you go back to work and can't request wages? This may be a loaded question. Sorry, Sarah, it is a loaded question, but it's also a question we've seen a lot of over the last few months, and I know Gwen can answer this one.
Yeah, so if you're working part-time gigs, and a part-time gig could even be like, hey, I'm just doing a live stream show on Facebook or on YouTube, and maybe someone's sending me money on Venmo or PayPal, or maybe you're giving instructions to someone on how to play an instrument via Zoom. Any of that money that you collect, you can still request for benefit payments. It will just ask you how much money you made over X period of time, and then you would just provide that information. And let's just kind of talk numbers here. So let's say if you're receiving the minimum amount of just $207 a week, as long as you don't make above $250 over that week span, you're still entitled to the prorated amount of the $207 plus the additional $600. So if you're doing part-time work, you're still entitled to benefits. You just have to put them in whenever you're requesting your payments.
That's awesome. Thank you, Gwen. And thank you, Sarah and Amir, for submitting those questions to us. I think we want to bring in Claudia Chapin now. And Claudia, you were referred over to us by our other ATX Music Votes team member, Christina Flores. So we're happy to have you here. I don't know much about your story, Claudia, so maybe you can share that with Aubrey and Scott, and they'll have some questions for you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope yes.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Well, I'm a classical musician. I'm an opera singer, freelance, and most of my friends and circles are classical freelance musicians. So where we get contracted a year in advance for things, all those contracts have gone away. So it's money that we plan an entire life around. And because we have to be smart and it's like our civic duty to cancel these shows, it's left a whole community of opera singers homeless, even because half of us travel all year long. And when we're not working, sometimes we have to live with our parents. I personally live in Austin, Texas, and we're a dual income house. I have not collected unemployment because this time would be the time where I would pick up work. It's around March through last month is when I would pick up work. Most of my work has now been either postponed or delayed, but I've had so many of my friends. So this is their main job, and their side job would be like barista or doing this or doing that. This is their main job. So if they're losing their main job and now they can't even work at a coffee shop, which was supposed to be their side implement money, because not everyone has the luxury or is privileged enough to have money in a savings account. There's a whole industry of classical musicians and mariachi people who don't have that. So it's just, we need to extend it. I have so many friends who are essentially on suicide watch, and I'm smiling about it, but it's just the depth of not having the privilege of a savings or some sort of side job is immense. And if anything, the COVID has proven to us that a lot of us are more disposable than we thought we were. So extending this, it just means like enough to pay and it's enough money to feed yourself, but it's not enough money to pay bills, and it's not enough money to even if you're sharing rent, it's not enough. And where other countries, their arts is funded, we're not that country. So it's I just wanted to support all those mariachi players who are out there who live off of gigs and they can't go to restaurants and play. That's how they make their money. And all the classical singers who are just kind of in limbo, trying to figure out where they're going to fit until next year. And hopefully that's if we get out of this.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. I know I unfortunately have known of a few people on suicide watch and also people that have acted on it in this time. And that is a very sensitive topic. And I hope that anybody watching isn't too triggered by that or anything, but that's not really, I mean, it's the reality of the situation that we're facing right now. The promises are grayer. The world itself is at this point in which a lot of us are questioning what next. And I think, just like you and just like a lot of other musicians, I have relied on catering as my side gig, and that's disappeared for the foreseeable future as well. I rely on restaurant gigs to pay a bigger portion as well. I'm not mariachi, but I am a singer-songwriter, and that was like, singing at breweries, singing at tap rooms, things like that, was a huge part of my income as well. And so I can absolutely relate to that experience. What do you think is going to happen to, I mean, you said you're not collecting unemployment yourself and you're fortunate enough to be in a dual income household. What do you think will happen to your friends that are unable to collect that extra $600 once it's gone?
Well, most of them have made the big pilgrimage back to their parents' home, which is very demoralizing if you're like anywhere in your mid 30s to 40s, and having to now lean on parents when you've worked so hard to get your discipline to a level where you can finally pay your own bills finally. And then you're put in the position where all of it is poof, gone. So it's important to extend this just to give a little bit of dignity, if we can even, as close to we can get to that word. Because there's a lot of people who might even have to leave. They might have to go back to either Mexico or Veracruz or something because they can't even sort of make a living here. It's already so difficult to live in this country. And that's even for people who have, their papers and are living here legally. It's so difficult to be here already. So not even having the extra amount of money that would kind of help feed yourself and sort of kind of pay some bills, maybe, it'd be difficult. So most of my friends have made the pilgrimage back to their parents' house. My husband is a classical guitarist, and he teaches, so that's an income that comes in. And for the month of March, April, and May, most of the weddings were canceled. He's a wedding guy. Now weddings can happen, but it has to be less than 10 people. So we're better, but we also have the privilege of having a savings, because you can be on top of it all you want, but bills are bills. And if you're not making enough money, you can't put away money, or you're
student debt is very real.
Yeah, you're sending money to somebody else that needs it. When I earn money, I have an amount of people that I have to send some money to. And this time has been very difficult. Everyone has to kind of just not give as much in order to survive this.
Yeah. And Claudia, first off, I really I want to thank you for telling your story. I think that is I mean, everyone is facing, a lot of these same things. I mean, with the protests that are going on, with just everything that is happening right now in this country, it's this, I think, for a lot of people is probably one of the hardest years that we've had in our lives, for sure. I think the other thing for me is, just from my own perspective here, is that I'm living my worst fear right now. It's, we're in that. And you mentioned like having the savings and how important that was. I was lucky enough to also have a little bit of a savings, and if that assistance like were to run out, I'd have a few months to coast. But then I'm back living my it really into it. So long story short, but I think my question to you is, how, like, your friends, your family, like mentally, how are we kind of getting around this? How are you all coping with this, just from a mental health point of view?
I think that being optimistic is kind of, I think, a human characteristic. All of us are always on an optimistic, like it could be worse, because it is worse right now. So it could be even worse, but I think we're in the middle of some real transformation. And so it's really difficult to be optimistic because you have to be realistic. I check up on all my people, all of them. Just, how are you doing today? Even a hi, a text. Hey, how you doing? How's it going? I got this. Do you need something? Checking up on everybody and being kind to each other, because we're practicing so much patience, and it's very, very easy to forget that we're human. And when musicians and artists and dancers and directors and the long list of people are put in the back burner, like, well, you should have gotten a job that made money or something like insane like that. It's hard to not feel angry or depressed or a little hopeless or lost. I think the great thing about gig work is that people are needing to be versatile, and it's not the same thing with classical musicians. Most of us kind of, this is what we do. And yeah, we pick up some other things, but this is our specialty. So what, as a community, as my friends, we just are keeping, in contact with each other. And in the moment that we hear a grant's coming up or this is coming up, we tell each other immediately to help each other. Or maybe, sign up for this and vote for that, to just kind of keep us in the know so we can move forward to this not happening again, being smarter when contracts come in and not just going, okay, the company is going to take care of me. No, the company's going to take care of themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I think I was such a huge bummer, but
No,
if you
it was
have a
amazing
to hang out with us, we're going to bring in one more guest to kind of talk about, I think we got a lot of great perspectives from a lot of different portions of our music community. And one of these members works in a kind of a different genre as well, and has so much experience in all of these realms, and is also experiencing some of these things we're talking about. So I'm going to bring in Joel LaViolette to join us in the conversation. Hey, Joel, how are you?
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Joel.
Hey,
yeah,
good to see y'all here.
And again, I'll hand the reins back to Aubrey and Scott to kind of ask you some questions, and even Dave, Claudia, if you guys have questions for Joel as well. I think that's what we want to do here.
Well,
Joel, hey, how's it going?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Aubrey. It's cool. Go ahead. I talked a lot. Go ahead.
I was just saying hi, and mainly wanted to ask. I don't know that much about what you do. So first of all, can you give us a little background on your career in the music world in Austin, and what you were up to before the pandemic and what you're up to now?
Yeah, sure. Well, my specialty, I guess, is traditional Zimbabwean music. So I teach marimba. I had a marimba school. I had a brick and mortar school for several years, and that's mainly moved virtually. But I'm a musician and a composer. I've got a few bands here in town, and which doesn't mean a lot these days, I guess. I'm in the Mosaic Sound Collective. I've got my studio over there, as well as our rehearsal room. So yeah, just another musician trying to piece it all together.
I would jump in real quick and note that, Joel, you straddle the world from analog to digital pretty much completely to the far ends of the spectrum. And you could maybe just let the people watching know a little bit about what you do as far as EDM, or I don't know what you would even want to call it, but everything from very, very traditional instruments made out of natural materials all the way to kind of the most cutting edge electronic and digital stuff.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so yes, I have acoustic style Zimbabwean marimba music, which is just straight up traditional stuff. And, I work with my teachers in Zimbabwe and been doing that for, I guess, almost 30 years. And yeah, I love electronic music and experimental music and modular synths, and I build synths and video projection mapping. And so a lot of my work, a lot of the stuff, I guess, that pays these days is like site-specific installation pieces that kind of mixes music and visuals. I'm on the Texas Commission of the Arts touring roster, and so through grants from the city and TCA and all that are a big chunk of what has sort of helped me keep things rolling, and being able to pay the band and all that kind of stuff, and keep my kid eating tacos. Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
And so the federal unemployment benefit, how would you be affected if this extra $600 a week were not extended?
Yeah, well, I'm sure like everyone else here, the vast majority of my income is basically evaporated. And we're all, we all want to get back to work. I want to be gigging and working as much as anybody, but I cannot morally, it's not something I can do. So politics aside, I just don't see how it is possible for us as musicians to get back to work. And that's so unemployment. This unemployment has been the single thing that's kind of kept any of us going. I'm a sole proprietor, so I was able to get unemployment. And yeah, like most people here, maybe like comes to like $700 something a week, and going down to $200 a week. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
I don't even know what
It's
to say.
laughable,
Man.
right? Jeez.
Yeah.
200 is less than 700, right?
It's less than 700,
It is.
man.
Okay.
I'm not an expert in math, but I think that's
As
correct.
a musician, I can count to 4, but that's pretty much it. So.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, I guess it seems like what I'm reading, researching, whatever political side people are on, they're all saying something is going to have to happen. And so I'm really thankful for that. I don't mean to be overly optimistic about it, but I think everybody is recognizing that something has to continue on here to support people. I don't know what that's going to look like, but we are musicians and we're agile, and we're used to, like Claudia was saying, you see the grants, you see the things. And so I'm real thankful for Pat and Nakia and this awesome musicians group. I think there are a lot of eyeballs out there and ears, that are trying to keep track of things. So that's great.
Thank you, Joel.
Yeah.
It means a lot to hear.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and guys, this has been great. I think, from my perspective, it's like we all know the stories, that we need this money to be extended. We've got to take action. And so if you're out there watching, and certainly everybody in the room today, we have a homework assignment, don't we? And, right now, I'm just going to go ahead and put up those graphics again real quick. I did copy that contact information into the comment section of these live streams on Austin, Texas Musicians public page and on our Austin, Texas Musicians community private page for our group members. So guys, really what we need everyone to do now is to take action. Call those numbers, email those web forms, and if you're of the mindset that you want to mail an old-fashioned letter and stick a stamp on there and mail it in, you can do that too. All of this stuff really works, and as we heard from Sarah earlier, these things actually really are heard. I think there's a notion that when we hear, oh, call your senators, make this thing happen, we think, well, that doesn't really make a difference. But coming straight from somebody who's in the know, Sarah with Lloyd Doggett's office, those things are heard, and they really do try to respond to each person who contacts them. So all we have to do is try now, guys. And we have about 2.5 weeks while Congress is in session to figure out what's next. I think it's good for us real quick to loop back and summarize some of the information. The HEROES Act that we thought, that was passed by the House is not going to happen. It's dead in the water. But senators, I think, realize, that they're going to have to figure out something, or else we're going to have a complete economic disaster on our hands. And so I think what we've been hearing is that benefit may extend through the end of the year, whether that's, I don't know if it'll be 600. Aubrey, I think we were hearing maybe 450. I don't think it'll be as low.
A number that's been thrown around. I think, yeah, like there's basically word from articles I've been reading, and one that Scott sent me last night, Forbes, it's somewhere between 200 and 400 is what they're playing with right now. But again, I think it is something that is really dependent on where in the USA you live. Even I mean, personally, for me, even like 600 a week, I mean, I'd be grateful for it. However, it's like, it's going to be stretching it pretty hardcore for those of us that have things like, I mean, my car loan didn't go away. A lot of people's student debt didn't go away. It's gonna, you know, I feel like it can't be just like one amount. It's got to coincide with mortgage freezes, rent freezes, a lot of other things are on the table here, and we're going to be left to decide whether we're going to pay rent, our phone bills, our internet bills, feed ourselves. So there's a lot at play right now, and I think if you got the time at home, which a lot of us do, taking 5 minutes a day is something that's really achievable for all of us. And whether you feel comfortable calling, emailing, writing a letter, there are so many different ways to find your lane and stick in it, and, you know, be persistent about it, especially in times like these, especially in the next 2.5 weeks.
And to that very point, you know, talk about persistence. There's one of our group members and an amazing musician who I respect very much, who has been dealing with this struggle quite a bit over the last few months. We've seen the comments. We've tried to see what we can do to help him. And I want to bring our last guest of the day into the room now. John, welcome.
How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
John.
Okay.
Hey, man.
How's everybody doing? I'm having technology struggles today, so hopefully this is all clear and pretty looking.
Yeah, I think
Gotcha.
But okay. We can probably if you can turn down the volume on your a little bit. Yeah.
How about now?
I think that's better.
Better?
Perfect. Yeah.
All right.
And then
John going by visuals in the background, and seemed like it was fine, but gain structures, it's a thing.
It really is. John, I know that you've been kind of stuck in this struggle quite a bit over the last few months, you know, and we've seen you kind of talk about this stuff on the group page and trying to get connected to TWC, first of all, but obviously to the federal pandemic benefits as well. John, if you would share your story about that with us and what this all means to you at this point, if that goes away on Saturday.
Oh man. Well, I mean, I'm probably not saying anything that nobody's said before, but you know, obviously, if this goes away on Saturday, then we're all going to be in real deep trouble, because not only for us, but for pretty much the entire country that might even be using some of that pandemic support to pay for things like entertainment from musicians, even online. I mean, it's just a domino effect where you take anything we're getting from the government and nobody's going back into venues anytime soon. You know, it's one of the reasons I've spent so much time, energy, and money, quite honestly, on all the tech setup. It's not easy, and it doesn't always work properly, which is 45 minutes of like, oh, come on, video. But you know, for me personally, I've been taking this time to learn how to become a home television studio, like a whole new set of skills that you evidently are going to have for the foreseeable future. Mm-hmm. And then taking some of that pandemic support and putting it into, basically reinvesting it into new business gear. And but we're not in a position where we can really put the pedal to the metal on that. Like, we can't just suddenly hope something happens. Like everybody's been saying, we all have bills. And hopefully the federal government understands that. I mean, if it weren't for this pandemic support that they're giving, the entire economy would pretty much collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
John, are you there?
I think John froze up for a second, but
That was a good freeze.
I think it's a good freeze.
It's a good freeze.
It is a good freeze. There we go.
Oh, there he is. I think John, I want to bring up a point that you just mentioned. And you know, when I say that, like, if anyone knows about reinvention, like I saw you years ago at Momo's on a stomp box doing an amazing cover of Kashmir, And there's so many ways that I've seen you reinvent your sort of even your style and your music over the years. Let's all talk for a minute about just like you said, you know, I think we're all looking at having to reinvest in our music business in a whole different way now. And could you comment on that a little more, John, and maybe everyone else after that as well?
Yeah, well, you know, I think one of the things that creatives have in our pocket that makes this a little bit easier or gives us better equipment to deal with it or better tools to deal with it is that we know how to pivot. And, you know, for me, it's gone from one-man show to, well, you know, a lot of people are doing that, or beatboxing to something else. I mean, there's just figuring out which lane is the most appropriate for the moment, and being able to sidestep smoothly into it. You know, for me personally, I can't say that that's actually a good approach. I think some people who have just done one thing all the time and kept doing it, you can be really successful with that model too. But for me, it's always been like, okay, well, you know, how do I create a different, like, you know, I created Patronism. Dave was on it, and actually Rattletree was on it. And it was just too soon. People didn't quite get it, and I didn't have the ability to explain it properly. So Patreon got the $60 million in funding instead of that. So, you know, it was just like, how do we make a living? How do we solve these problems? And that goes into, what skills do I have that I could pivot the least and get right into the most productive output right now? That's kind of how I've always approached things. But it doesn't mean that it's been easy, and it certainly doesn't mean that I don't know, other than the fact that if this goes away, I'm going to have to do some neck-breakingly quick pivoting, and I think everybody will. And there's going to be a lot of broken necks out there, so I don't know. That's probably a good place to pause on that in terms of reinvention. But
that's one of the worst side effects of COVID-19, by the way.
Neck breaking.
Neck breaking.
I know opera companies are trying to do either drive-through theater, which is also going to be, I know a couple of DJs have been doing that already, where you just kind of go into a, you know, like a drive-through movie style of seeing live art, because most opera singers, yeah, we're great in recordings, but we're really meant for a theater or a space. So I know opera companies are trying to see if they can adopt a drive-through situation. But again, that's not in the safety regulations for opera is different, because we need to have musicians, and then we have people making our costumes. It's like it's a really large group of people that are unemployed. We're trying to figure out how we can still use our skill sets and still keep opera going. Even when it was at its best, it was still, unfortunately, not a very funded art form. And so now we can't even get people in the theater. So maybe if we get them in a drive-through situation where they can be in their cars, maybe that will work. I know Opera Neo is trying to do like a Zoom meeting opera thing, which is very complicated. And but yeah, every industry that's in music is doing their best to not completely break their necks, but to pivot so we can keep this going.
Yeah, Dave, you don't know anything about the split screen experiences, do you at all? No, that's a joke. Dave.
Yeah, what I call, you know, like a Brady Bunch style production, right? Where you're gathering musical content ahead of time, people singing like you, Claudia, or people playing instruments like Joel or John or any of y'all, gathering them ahead of time, syncing them all up. It is a crushing amount of work to do it the right way. I've had people ask after the fact, do like a big production and go, "What app is that?" I'm like, "That's not an app. That's like 2 weeks of loss of sleep and a lot of work to put something like that together." And yeah, John is absolutely right. We've all pivoted before, or I don't know, many people have pivoted before, and we're being asked to pivot even more now, and largely towards video. I, like many people, I had dabbled on like iMovie for many years, reluctantly, begrudgingly even. and then finally made the leap to just like, screw it. I'm gonna buy Final Cut Pro. I'm gonna learn more about that. It just makes sense to have the high powered software. And it's occurred to me recently. I just like read an article that posits that millennials are now old and not cool anymore. So if you're older than that, get like me, get ready to be even less cool. I was thinking about how Gen Zers who are 18 or something, it's like, have they ever just sat there and like listened to the audio of a 4-minute and 10-second long song? That I don't know. Have they only ever consumed music as video? It's like years ago that Beyonce was dropping entire albums worth of music videos. So it is tempting to almost think that it's like a quaint art form, and it breaks my heart, because I do want people to just sit there, not doing anything, close your eyes, and like let this music, the beauty of the music, wash over you. And some people, of course, are always going to do that. But the vast majority of people consuming social media, I mean, they're looking at a rectangular screen all day, every day. We're doing it too. So it is kind of like, it's a kick in the butt, this pandemic that we're living through. And for all the negativity and all the heartbreaking that's happening, and the neck breaking, John, maybe it is also a kick in the butt that we probably should have been moving a little bit more in the direction of evil video anyway before this. Now we're being forced even more to do that, even though it is the worst thing ever, and I wish it would just die.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. And I'll pitch back to Aubrey and Scott to close this out. But before we do that, John and Joel, do you guys have any closing thoughts on any of the stuff we've talked about today, or even about contacting our senators and getting this action, making sure they extend that federal pandemic unemployment compensation? Leave us your closing thoughts, if you will, real quick. Joel.
Well, I'm not sure if this is a succinct closing thought, but I did realize I didn't mention, someone else did mention this, but just the sort of ripple down effect that this is going to have. For me, I have a studio at Mosaic, and Dan Redmond runs Mosaic. I love him, and I called Dan a few days ago, and I'm not going to be able to pay my rent at Mosaic once this cuts. So like, this is a very good friend of mine that's doing something amazing for the Austin community, that I'm just one more of many of his tenants that are no longer able to afford to have a commercial space. And so that breaks my heart. I mean, Dan has stood anyway, and just like, to be a guy who doesn't have the money to pay him now, that sucks. that hurts my ego, that hurts my pride. But it's a ripple. I mean, I'm one of many. Dan has this thing. He's hurting now. If his space, he's one of many spaces that are in danger, and it just goes on and on and on. So I don't know. Sure, $600 a week. Sure, that'll help. I'm sorry, but like, it's so much bigger, right? It's so much bigger.
Definitely.
Anyway,
and John. Let me mute myself. Go ahead.
I think everybody's pretty much nailed it. I mean, the ripple effects, it really comes down to where you stand philosophically. Do you value stability and potentially a different kind of creativity that comes out of that stability, where we can actually spend our energy on the thing we're doing to entertain people? Or do we, are you the kind of person who likes the creativity that's like, oh, the wolves are coming, better duck, better hide, better run, better fight? There's a sort of I think a philosophical conflict between those two sides in our country right now. People that just believe, cut them loose, make everybody learn something new. And I'm like, man, maybe if we had spent also the last 40 years giving people critical thinking skills, or even focusing on that in public, in making it cool to be smart. That's kind of a heartbreak for me, is that it's just not cool to be well informed and have a broad perspective and be educated. that's getting way off into a different philosophical realm. But in terms of, immediate sort of closing statements, if you will, it's, I think the more I got involved with Indivisible as soon as it came out, like before it was an organization, and they just had the Indivisible guide, and I thought, we need this handbook. And so if people aren't aware, Indivisible is an excellent organization, I think. I personally think, because they're helping to, they took the Tea Party model, which is a really riled up base, focused, with good skills. And the skills involve being succinct when you call, being polite, and understanding how to get your message through to your representatives. And of course, understanding that their prime directive is to get reelected. So Cruz right now, he's okay. He understands that he made it past the Beto challenge, and he's okay for the next 4 to 5 years. Cornyn is the one we need to lean on, because he's up this time, and he's going to need to do something to keep his butt in that seat. And so the more we focus on, if the economy tanks while you have your butt in that seat, guess whose butt is going to find a new seat in the fall? So with this, it's not just sort of a compassionate, smart thing to do. It is a political tactic he can use to keep his seat. So I think that's the main thing. Ooh, I'm so icy and blue. But, so the idea is, like, if you just know where the leverage is, and right now the leverage is really with Cornyn, because Cruz could just tell everybody to screw off and go to Mexico. Cornyn is the one that's weak, because he has to keep his seat if he wants to keep his paycheck, So I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Like, really, we need to lean on Cornyn, because he's the one that's most likely to try and figure out what to do to stay in office.
And John, am I right to say that on this theoretical phone call to John Cornyn, we should both, ask him to do stuff for us, but then refrain from saying that we won't be voting for him regardless? Would that be
one of the other things, and this is going to come as a shock to anybody that knows me, but one of the other things I've been really practicing for the last 4 years is being succinct. And so there are two things. One, you don't need to tell him, I think you're an awful person, I would never vote for you anyway.
Got it.
You might, depending on where your morals lie, you might insinuate he could get your vote. At the very least, he could get your respect. And all it takes is one angry customer to take away 20. So you could even talk about that and say, hey, look, it's not just me. If you want 500,000 angry customers, just imagine how hard it's like, what kind of an uphill battle are you going to be facing? And I'm just saying, you could be honest, but the main thing is, don't get too narrative about it, because all they really want to know is, where are you from? What do you want the senator to do? And what's your name? And the quicker you can get to that without going off on a beautiful soliloquy about, all the impacts, they're getting that from all areas. So tactically, one of the better things I've found is that you come in, you're super friendly, you thank them out of the gate for taking all these calls, because you're absolutely sure that they're completely overwhelmed, and you just wanted to express the dire need that we have for the continuation of this pandemic support, because without it, as he probably knows, running into an election, a collapsing economy is not what he needs. That's probably how I would say it. I'd pretty much get it there. So if we have a specific, whatever, was it HR 1? I'm not sure what the House resolution is, the one that came through. We should get the name of that and say we'd like the Senate to pass it as is. Because it's just like, wants to pass it as is. Oh, and by the way, you do have an election coming up in Washington. That's kind of the, that's a quick, succinct way to say it.
Thank you, John. And I want to echo what you just said, because actually just a little bit ago, Gwen was able to get through to Cornyn's office. nothing's going through to Cruz's office. Okay, I don't know what's going on over there, but I think it's important to know that someone did answer the phone over at Cornyn's office. And Gwen's kind of entry point was to talk about one of the successes that they've already had and thank them for it, to kind of open that door a little bit. And then she was, kind of like, oh, and by the way, I'm a entertainment attorney in Austin, and I represent all these musicians, and we're about to be homeless and without food. And so she was able to kind of use that entry point to really start talking about the FPUC extension. So there's a lot of value to that, John. Thank you for bringing that up. I think now, this has been great, and we've been going on for about 2 hours now. And I just wanted to thank all of you guys for coming on. We also had Zack Morgan on earlier. So thank you, Zack. And Sarah Lavin-Jones from Lloyd Doggett's office. She's been an invaluable resource to us these last few weeks. So I want to thank her for coming on the show again. We've had her quite a few times over these last few months. And also to Gwen Seale, who is on the board of Texas Accountants and Lawyers for the Arts. But I'm going to go ahead and take myself out and take our guests out of the stream and leave it with Aubrey and Scott for a second. And Aubrey and Scott, if you will, just kind of summarize some of the information we've talked about, and we can talk about the push to get these guys in contact, and I'll put up those banners once again to show Cruz and Cornyn's information. So Aubrey, if you want to talk to us a little bit more and tell us, your closing thoughts.
So on my side of things, I am depending on the unemployment for the time being. I, like many of the musicians that were on today, have been trying to figure out how to pivot and how to make it work in this world. Before the pandemic and on the shutdown, I had a lot of gigs lined up that were going to be, really well paying. This was going to be the year to make it to make my career. And that has all changed. It's definitely not the year I signed up for. We are now faced with taking action in this regard. And to take action, it doesn't take too much time in a day. And if you follow John's points, being succinct is key. You don't have to go on and tell your whole story, but you do need to tell the parts that are important. Please, in the next 2.5 weeks, get out there, take action, call your representatives, call Senator Cruz, maybe lean more heavily on Cornyn. You can reach out to any one of us for support in this regard. If you're nervous about it, I'll personally be on a call with you while I go on mute, and you call that representative if you need help in that way. Hopefully, if we get more and more people calling in, they'll realize the gravity of the situation. They'll realize that $600 a week is not cutting it for some people, and if it disappears or reduces, it's going to put a lot of people in the lurch. Scott, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of, going off of what you're saying there. I mean, I think that, this is kind of like what they do with like the reconciliation bills, where, they kind of like kick the can down the road, as I believe it was Gwen or Sarah that was saying. And it's, this is something that can't wait. It's something that we, the assistance that has been given to us because we're out of work at no fault of our own. It's just something that needs to we need to expedite this process as soon as we can. And I think that putting, urgency on that is going to be a really good thing. And, for me personally, I've kind of decided to, when I'm looking at social media, when I'm looking at Facebook, when I'm looking at things, and there's opinions all around about, like you were saying earlier, Aubrey, about whether to wear the mask or whether to, do all, whatever the case may be, coronavirus being a hoax or whatever, all the conspiracies and all that stuff that's been floating around out there. It's just really, I mean, I cannot tell you how just enraged about that stuff that I have been. And that's just the COVID part of it. That's not, George Floyd. That's not any of this other, Black Lives Matter. This is just the COVID thing, right? So this year has been a year. And I think that what I kind of decided to do is really, if you are as upset and as frustrated as I am, then I would hope that you would take action, that everyone that is watching this or that will watch this will take some action. Call your senators, call Cruz, call Cornyn's office. Let's get them on the phone. Let's see what we can do. DM them, tweet at them, mail them, message them, email them. I mean, whatever we can do as a collective for them to understand that if they take this money away from us, it's going to bring the economy to a halt. Because what we're doing with this money is we're paying other people, or we're paying, for stuff that we need to continue doing what we're doing. And streaming live, going live online is not cheap at all. It is not cheap. It is a huge investment. So yeah, we need the help. We need the support. And this 600 needs to continue. If it can't continue, we need something very, very, very close to it. So just thank you all. Thank everybody for watching. And please, call your congressman, call your senators. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. And if you weren't able to tune into the whole thing, there's a lot of information in this episode in general. So scroll through, use that little buffer thing to get in there and get educated. And hopefully this
I'll
answers
post
your
links.
questions.
Yeah, I'll post links down below for stuff just so that you can have that information too.
Absolutely. Alrighty.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time. This is the issue we're fighting for now. There will probably be way more issues in the future. And tune in whenever you can and take action. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all.